A man took one bite of a drumstick. A second later, he exploded where he stood. His death was the consequence of his mother having broken the rules of the game. She had killed her own teammate, and the organization's punishment had come for the entire family simultaneously. Across the world at that same moment, an elderly man watched footage of a war on screen. He made a single phone call. The news then reported that both sides had agreed to peace negotiations. The family in question evidently controlled the levers of global conflict. But word had now reached the other families. Grace had destroyed the Raduma clan. Under the organization's statutes, the remaining 5 families were authorized to hunt her. Grace, meanwhile, had collapsed unconscious after killing her former husband's household. When she came to, she was handcuffed to a hospital bed and accused of murdering the entire family. Then the door opened and a young woman walked in. Faith, her younger sister, whom she hadn't seen in years. Their parents had died when they were children. Grace had left at 15, abandoning Faith to fend for herself. Faith had never stopped resenting it, and the relationship between them had never recovered. The police had contacted Faith as Grace's only living relative. When Faith asked what had happened, Grace refused to explain. It was only as Faith turned to leave that Grace finally told the truth. She had just married into a family that insisted she draw a card and play a game. She drew hide and seek. They chased her through the night. She survived. The family members who hadn't died during the chase detonated spontaneously afterward. They appeared to belong to some kind of cult punished for losing. At the organization's headquarters, the elderly chairman himself, the leader, had summoned the family representatives. His own children arrived first. His first instruction to them was to kill him. The coming hunt required the family patriarch to lead it personally, and he was bedridden and unable to act. He needed them to inherit the position by ending his life. Grace, still in the hospital, knew nothing of any of this. As police prepared to transfer her, a throwing knife hit an officer in the throat. Grace and Faith ran. The attacker was a member of one family that had jumped ahead of protocol, unwilling to wait for the ritual to begin. Grace grabbed the fallen officer's service weapon and still couldn't match the man's strength. She was nearly finished when he exploded without warning. She didn't yet understand why. She found the keys, removed her cuffs, pulled her wedding dress back on, and the two of them moved toward the exit. A gas canister rolled into the corridor ahead of them. They went down. When they woke with bags being pulled from their heads, they were surrounded by strangers, wealthy, composed, watching them with detached curiosity, as though observing animals in an enclosure. A man stepped forward and identified himself as the organization's sole attorney, present to oversee the enforcement of its rules. The situation, stated simply, Grace had won the last game and annihilated the Raduma family. She had therefore earned the right to compete for the chairmanship. She and Faith would replay the hunting game from the previous night, this time with Faith included as prey. Survive until morning and the chairmanship was hers. Kill Grace and it went to the killer instead. Grace refused repeatedly. Her objections were noted and ignored. Both sisters were sedated. They woke in an open courtyard, handcuffed to each other. The families had already begun. A drone appeared overhead, moving toward them as though attempting to communicate. A gunshot from somewhere destroyed it. They ran into the trees. A woman with a gun moved through the forest without appearing to see them, crouched in the underbrush until a man with an axe nearly took them from the other side. He grabbed both of them in one motion and brought them down. They fought together and managed to pull free. The grounds offered no safe direction. Gunfire came from an elevated position and drove them into a pavilion. It continued. Faith spotted a pile of dry leaves and formed an idea. As the sniper trained his sights on them, smoke began to fill the pavilion. The shooter fired blind into the haze. Two people trying to escape through the smoke were then set upon by a masked attacker, until a bullet struck a gas canister and the explosion sent all three of them through the air. Grace, one arm badly torn, pulled Faith up and ran. The sniper, watching from a distance, was relieved to see the masked killer still moving. If his target had died too easily, he knew his own position would become untenable. The sisters stumbled into a building that had the look of a recently vacated wedding reception. Faith sat her sister down and carefully extracted shrapnel from her shoulder piece by piece. They had barely finished when another attacker appeared. They retreated into the hotel storage room, where a cutting machine happened to be running. They used it to sever the handcuffs. The man followed the sound into the storeroom and found only the machine. He turned to leave. Both sisters hit him from behind. Grace shoved him into a tumble dryer and switched it on. When she opened it again, he was dead. She took his phone and dialed emergency services. She believed she had found help. The call connected to a woman who had already intercepted it. The telecommunications infrastructure in the area was under the organization's ownership, and every outgoing call had been rerouted to her. She played along and told Grace to come to the front entrance. Grace was about to go when a woman from one of the families stepped in front of her and said she meant no harm. She was the owner of the drone. Her attorney had located a provision in the rules. If Grace married her son, neither sister would need to die, and the woman's family would inherit the chairmanship. Her son, she noted, was simple-minded. Grace would be free to live as she chose. Grace was almost tempted until she asked what the condition actually required. The woman told her she would only need to participate in the hunting games when they were held. Grace refused without hesitation. She had no intention of becoming the thing she despised. A shot broke the quiet. The sniper had found them. The woman stepped in front of him, knowing he wouldn't fire at her, and continued pressing Grace to reconsider. Faith added her voice to the appeal. The sniper tried to move around to take Grace directly. Grace picked up the woman's knife and drove it through the attacker's throat. The woman, however, had just killed a member of her own team. She exploded on the spot. The son in the hall, still working on his drumstick, followed his mother a moment later. The sisters moved toward the entrance to wait. The intercepted phone rang. Grace's voice, saying they were at the door, asking why why there were no police. When the people inside ran out to look, the sisters were waiting for them. Grace had recognized the woman's voice on the call from the start and had used it to draw them out. She demanded they open the gates. Before the doors could move, engines roared and the counterattack began. A car accelerated toward Grace with no sign of braking, then swerved at the last instant and slammed through the doors behind her. The female hunter had decided she'd had enough of all of it and was trying to escape. Grace dodged the car, but not the woman. She drove a nail spike directly into Grace's shoulder before Faith knocked her down. They retreated back into the grounds. Grace pulled the spike from her own shoulder and then turned on her sister, telling her she was late, that it was her fault Grace had suffered this much, and driving her away with her anger. She was pushing Faith toward safety. These people wanted Grace. With distance between them, Faith would survive. Faith hadn't made it out of the building before an attacker found her. Grace encountered her own problems simultaneously. A woman with a rocket launcher. The projectile missed Grace by misdirection and bought her a moment. As the woman closed in, Grace grabbed a canister of pepper spray from the table and discharged it in her face. The woman tore it away and returned the favor. Both of them were functionally blind and swinging at each other across the hall in the dark. Across the building, Faith was being beaten badly and couldn't get up. Grace, also losing ground, was seconds from a blow to the head when she threw herself at the woman and knocked her down. She found a piano keyboard nearby and brought it down across the woman's face. An announcement over the intercom: Faith was in the broadcast room. Grace had 10 minutes to appear in the main hall or Faith would be dead. Grace didn't stop moving. She knew that if she died, Faith died too. She went to the security office, armed herself, and walked back into the building. People scattered when they saw the gun. She pressed the muzzle against one attacker and demanded to know where her sister was. He couldn't form words. A child with 2 pistols appeared in a doorway and opened fire. Grace ran deeper into the building, found herself out of ammunition, grabbed an iron bar from the kitchen, and locked herself in. The man with Faith outside the door told her to open it or he would shoot Faith in the head. Grace called back through the door, "Marry me." She explained the loophole, the provision that had been offered earlier. Marriage into the family would secure both their lives and give him the chairmanship. He confirmed the details with the attorney. He agreed. The sisters were temporarily safe. Grace was shown to a room to clean up. When she emerged, the effect was considerable. As she sat quietly in the room, the man's older sister slipped in and began speaking against her brother, cataloging his worst qualities, proposing that Grace help her control him after the marriage. Grace listened with a composed expression. Then the brother appeared in the doorway. He had heard everything. He had long since exhausted his patience with a sister who sought to manage every aspect of his life, and now she had come to recruit his soon-to-be wife against him. He snapped her neck. Killing within one's own family line, it turned out, carried no penalty under the rules. Grace walked to the altar in a black wedding dress, the organization's members arrayed on both sides. Faith was present. The ceremony had something of a blood oath to it. Both parties signed the contract in their own blood, exchanged rings, and kissed. The marriage was binding. The man received the chairman's ring and began celebrating his ascension to the most powerful seat in the world. Grace picked up a pen and drove it into his throat. In the silence that followed, she stabbed him again and again. She removed the ring from his hand, put it on her own, and kicked him into the pit below. She turned to the stunned congregation and pointed out, calmly, that her husband was dead. She was therefore his successor. Her first act as chairman was to withdraw from the organization and dissolve her seat on the council. The attorney, consulting the rules, found no prohibition against it. The sisters looked at each other and started laughing. Grace asked what would happen if no one was wearing the ring by dawn. The attorney said the consequences would be severe. The god they served would be very displeased. Grace took off the ring and dropped it into the pit. Dawn was 3 minutes away. She told them they had 3 minutes to fight over the one thing that might save them. The cult members, every one of them consumed by appetite and ambition, threw themselves into the pit. They landed on top of one another and tore into each other in the dark, hunting for the ring with whatever time remained. Grace and Faith walked toward the exit, leading the goat that had been set aside for sacrifice. Dawn arrived. The explosions came one after another from inside the pit. Every last cult member was gone. One final follower, believing he had stayed safely clear, ran toward the sisters in excitement. A moment later, he detonated. Both sisters were covered head to toe.